Welcome to A Slice with Dice, a podcast exploring the ideas, pressures, and possibilities shaping how we learn, lead, and grow. I'm Corey Alderdice. For over 20 years, my work has lived at the intersection of gifted education, leadership development, and school culture, supporting students as they find their strengths, educators as they stretch their thinking, and schools as they build pathways that expand opportunity. Ready to dive in? Here's this week's Slice.
Every role in a school comes with a view. The classroom teacher sees one version of the school. The counselor sees another. The coach, the residence life staff member, the admissions officer, the advancement director, the business manager, the parent sitting across the table, the board member reading a strategic plan, the community partner attending a public event, the student trying to find their place. Each sees something real. But none of them sees everything. And that may sound obvious, but in the life of a school, it's one of the easiest truths to forget. Schools are deeply human institutions, which means we experience them from where we stand. We tend to understand the work through the part of it we touch most directly, and because our own work often feels urgent, personal, and visible to us, it can become tempting to mistake our line of sight for the whole picture. The teacher sees the student who came to class exhausted but still tried. The counselor sees the family system behind the student's stress. The coach sees the young person learning discipline through practice and repetition. The residence life staff member sees what happens after the formal school day ends, when students are tired, homesick, lonely, silly, impulsive, generous, and very much still growing up. Those are not partial truths in the sense of being inaccurate. They are partial truths in the sense of being located. They are true from a particular place. But the same is true elsewhere in the school. The admissions team sees the anxious family trying to determine whether this school is the right fit. The communication staff sees the public narrative that shapes whether people understand the mission at all. The finance office sees the trade-offs that make some dreams possible and others unsustainable. The advancement office sees relationships that one day may fund scholarships, buildings, programs, or opportunities students will never know were fragile before they became real. The head of school or executive director sees the board, the budget, the legislature, the donors, the accreditor, the neighboring institutions, the long-range plan, and the next crisis that has not yet reached everyone else's desk. And students, of course, see the school in ways that adults sometimes miss entirely. They know the difference between what a school says and what it feels like. They know where belonging is real and where it's merely advertised. They know which adults notice. They know which expectations are meaningful and which ones are, well, mostly performance. They know the culture not as an abstract statement, but as a daily climate. Every one of these views matters. The challenge is that schools often ask people to do deeply committed work from inside one view, while rarely creating enough opportunities to understand the others. Over time, this can create a subtle fragmentation, not usually from bad intentions, not usually from laziness or cynicism or lack of care. More often, it happens because schools are busy, complex, and emotionally demanding places. People do the work in front of them. They solve the problem closest to them. They advocate from the evidence they can see. And then, slowly, the school becomes a collection of accurate but incomplete perspectives. And this is where misunderstanding begins. A teacher may wonder why leadership seems so focused on external partnerships, public messaging, legislative relationships, or donor cultivation when the real work from that teacher's vantage point is happening in classrooms every day. And the teacher isn't wrong, the real work is happening there. But an institutional leader may wonder why some people don't understand that those external relationships are very much part of what keeps the school alive, trusted, funded, and positioned to serve the students in the first place. And you know what? That leader is not wrong either. A family may wonder why a policy feels impersonal when a child's situation is so specific. A school administrator may understand why that policy exists, because without it, fairness begins to erode across dozens or hundreds of equally specific situations. Both perspectives contain truth. A board member may focus on long-term sustainability, risk, reputation, and strategic direction. A faculty member may focus on workload, student need, and whether the school's stated priorities are actually supported in practice. Again, both may be seeing something real. But schools get into trouble when these views are treated as competing loyalties rather than connected responsibilities. And this is why I've been thinking about what I call the proximity and purpose continuum for schools. The name is less important than the idea behind it. On one end, the work closest to students, teaching, advising, mentoring, coaching, counseling, challenging, supporting, correcting, encouraging, noticing. This is the work of daily proximity. It is where the mission becomes personal. On the other end, though, is the work that helps sustain the institution, governance, finance, public trust, partnerships, advocacy, advancement, facilities, enrollment, reputation, long-term planning. This is the work of institutional purpose. It is where the mission is protected, resourced, explained, and extended. Most people in a school live closer to one end of that continuum than the other. That's not a flaw, it's a part of the design. Schools need people who are deeply student proximate. They need adults whose first instinct is to ask, what is happening with this student? What does this child need? What is the lived experience of young people in our care? But schools also need people who are institutionally attentive. They need adults whose first instinct is to ask, what will sustain this work? What relationships need to be built? What resources must be secured? What risks must be managed? What future are we preparing for, even if it's not yet visible in the daily rhythm of the school? A healthy school does not choose between those questions. It learns how to hold them together. Now that's harder than it sounds, because proximity and purpose operate on different emotional frequencies. Student proximate work is immediate. It has names and faces. It happens in real time. A student is struggling now. A class is meeting now. A conflict needs attention now. A young person needs an adult to notice now. Institutional purpose work often moves on a longer timeline. It may involve conversations whose benefits are invisible for years. It may require attention to budgets, policies, facilities, legislation, or accreditation. It may feel distant from students because the student who benefits from that work may not have enrolled yet. The program it protects may not be threatened yet. The opportunity it creates may not exist yet. This difference in time horizon can produce real tension. People closest to students may become impatient with anything that feels abstract. They may hear words like strategy, branding, governance, development, or external relations and worry that the school is drifting away from its heart. And sometimes that worry is warranted. Schools can become too enamored with their own narratives. They can speak more fluently about mission than they practice it. They can confuse visibility with impact. But the opposite danger is also real. A school can become so absorbed in immediate need that it neglects the conditions that make its work possible. It can treat external trust as if it were automatic. It can underinvest in relationships until it needs them urgently. It can assume that because the mission is good, others will understand it, fund it, defend it, and make room for it. They may not. Good work does not explain itself. Good schools do not sustain themselves by virtue of goodness alone. They require translation. They require stewardship. They need people who can move between the daily experiences of students and the larger systems of support, legitimacy, and purpose that allow that experience to continue. That translation function may be one of the most important forms of leadership in any school. And I don't mean leadership only in the formal sense. Certainly heads of school, principals, executive directors, cabinet members, and senior administrators carry a special responsibility here. They're often the ones expected to speak across the whole institution. They have to explain the school to the outside world and explain the outside world back to the school. But the work of seeing the whole school cannot belong only to the person with the title. A teacher participates in this work when they understand how a family's first impression shapes trust before a student ever enters the classroom. A board member participates in it when they listen carefully enough to understand how a policy lands in the daily lives of students and teachers. A counselor participates in it when they help others see patterns that are not obvious from achievement data alone. A communication staff member participates in it when they tell stories that are not merely flattering, but true. A student participates in it when they help adults understand the difference between the school adults imagine and the school students actually inhabit. You see, the whole school comes into view only when these perspectives are brought into relationship with one another. And that doesn't mean that every person needs to know every detail. Teachers don't need to become budget officers, board members certainly do not need to become classroom instructors, advancement staff don't need to be counselors, and students do not need to carry adult institutional burdens. But each group needs enough understanding of the others to resist caricature. That word matters, caricature. In unhealthy cultures, the different parts of a school begin to reduce one another. Teachers become, in someone else's mind, resistant to change. Administrators become detached bureaucrats. Parents become demanding consumers. Board members are outsiders who do not understand the work. Communications becomes spin, advancement becomes fundraising, disconnected from mission, student support becomes softness, academic rigor becomes indifference to well-being, and it's exhausting. Most of these caricatures contain a sliver of experience, but they become damaging when they harden into assumption. And once that happens, people stop translating. They stop asking what another part of the school can see that they cannot. They stop wondering what responsibility another person, a colleague, is carrying. They begin to defend their view instead of expanding that. And a school cannot thrive that way. It may continue to function. It may even achieve impressive outcomes for a time. But internally, trust begins to narrow. The mission becomes something people invoke rather than something they interpret together. The work becomes divided into camps, those who really care about students, those who really understand the institution, those who really protect standards, those who really understand families, those who really see the future. The premise of this series is that those divisions are not only unhelpful, they're ultimately false. The person comforting a student after a hard day and the person making the case for the school in a public meeting are not doing opposite kinds of work. At their best, they are serving the same purpose from different points on the continuum. The person teaching a demanding course and the person cultivating a donor relationship that Monday may fuel a lab, a scholarship, or student experiences are not operating in separate moral universes. They are connected even if the connection is not always visible. The person enforcing a policy and the person advocating for a student exception may both be trying to preserve something essential. Fairness, dignity, care, trust, consistency, humanity. The tension is not proof that one side lacks understanding. It may be evidence that the school is holding more than one responsibility at once, because that is what schools do. They hold individual children and collective commitments. They hold present needs and future obligations. They hold care and standards. They hold traditions and change. They hold the intimate and the institutional. They hold the student in front of them and the school that must still be here for the students who come next. Seeing the whole school does not mean standing above all of this with perfect neutrality. No one does that. We all have a location. We all have a role. We all have a view shaped by our responsibilities, relationships, pressures, and hopes. Seeing the whole school means remembering that our view is necessary, but insufficient. It means asking with some humility, what can I see clearly from where I stand? But also, what might be beyond my view? That second question is the beginning of institutional wisdom. It keeps teachers from assuming that external work is automatically a distraction. It keeps the administrator from assuming that resistance is automatically small-minded. It keeps the board member from assuming that a strategy is clean until it touches the daily lives of real people. It keeps the parent from assuming that care for one child can be separated entirely for responsibility for the whole community. It keeps the school from shrinking its mission to whichever concern is loudest, nearest, or easiest to explain. The work beyond our view is still part of the work. That's the invitation of this series. To look again at the school not only from the place where we stand, but across the continuum of proximity and purpose. To honor the work closest to students without dismissing the work that sustains the institution. To value institutional stewardship without losing touch with the lived experiences of young people. To build schools where people understand not only their own responsibilities, but also the responsibilities others are carrying on behalf of the same mission. So in the next episode, I want to begin where schools must always begin, with the work closest to students. Because daily proximity is powerful. It gives educators insight that no dashboard, report, or strategic plan can fully capture. It's where trust is built, where belonging is tested, where challenge becomes personal, and where mission either becomes real or remains merely aspirational. But proximity, like every form of vision, has both power and limits. If we want to see the whole school, we have to begin by understanding what can only be seen up close.
A Slice with Dice is a production of Alderdice. Thanks for making time to reflect with me. If you're finding value in these episodes, I hope you'll subscribe and help spread the word. Until next time, lead boldly, listen closely, and keep pushing forward. I'll see you then.